This is legitimately one of the best interviews I've seen in a very long time. It features UFO whistleblower Matthew Brown, who introduced the UAP Special Access Program Immaculate Constellation to the world. It was such a great discussion, and I'm going to share with you some very fascinating points that he made. Let's just dive right in.
I'm very frustrated, though. I've watched these releases since May on the Pentagon website of various documents and some videos. I guess some of the videos are better than others, but for the most part, they're very frustrating. I don't know. I have every reason to believe that we have much better, higher quality imagery of stuff happening out there. And we're left with little black and white dots zipping around the screen. And okay, yeah, it's weird, but it's not convincing. And I think that the government's very happy that it's weird and not convincing. I think that these releases so far have really been incredibly boring and deliberately so, essentially to put the public to sleep and to make them sort of get acclimatized and psychologically conditioned to accept really a lot of garbage and say, oh, well, that's all we have, that's all we know. And that just isn't true. Do you agree with me?
Now, before we learn whether or not UFO whistleblower Matthew Brown agrees with the host on this, I want to play a clip from the 2023 UFO hearing with David Grush. Because when it comes to quality imagery of UAP or non-human intelligence craft, I'm gleaning that the elephant in the room is satellite imagery. Let's hear what David Grush had to say about that.
Satellite imagery. Let's talk about satellite imagery. We have satellites all over the place, some that we're aware of and many that we're not aware of, right? We're taking pictures of everything at every point and second. Mr. Grush, are you aware, do you have direct knowledge, or have you talked to people with direct knowledge that there are satellite imagery of these events?
That was one of my primary tasks at NGA, since we process, exploit, and disseminate that kind of information. I've seen multiple cases, some of which, to my understanding, and of course I left NGA in April, so that's my information cutoff date, but I personally reviewed both what we call overhead collection and from other strategic and tactical platforms that I could not even explain prosaically, and I have a degree in physics, by the way, as well. And I am aware that you guys have not seen these reports, unfortunately, and I don't know why.
Do you have direct knowledge, or you had spoken to people with direct knowledge that this imagery applies to crash sites, crash imagery?
I can't discuss that in an open session.
Okay.
So David Grush said that he saw satellite images he couldn't explain prosaically, and he doesn't understand why the Congress have not seen these reports. But very recently, he went much further than relaying that he's seen satellite imagery of UAP. He said he's seen recovered craft imagery. And as you just saw in the clip from the hearing, he wasn't willing to answer whether any of this presumably satellite imagery that was taken was of crash sites. But in the following clip, he goes into that.
I did get access to crash retrieval photos and everything, so I've seen the recovered vehicles and everything. So I would say that's probably the most stupendous thing, earth-shattering thing that changed my worldview when I got access to some of that years ago. And I do hope the administration, and I think they will, release that information in a further drop.
It's astonishing that he said that he thinks the administration will release that information regarding photos of crash retrievals in a further drop.
David, I gotta just jump in real quick there and give you a chance to talk about these crash site vehicles, because you got the hair on my wrist standing up. Just real quickly, I don't want to filibuster Joey here, but I'm very into this.
You got it.
Tell me about these crash sites that you've seen personally.
Yeah, a lot of them looked like what we saw. Some of the reporting dropped on Friday. There was a 1948 memo from the Chief of Naval Operations that discussed the flying disc pandemic that they were having, and they were enlisting help of the Air Force Intelligence Service. A lot of it was lenticular discs. Some was crescent moon shaped. I call it the flattened sunfish. There's a bunch of different morphologies that the U.S. government has recovered, from eggs to discs to crescent moon, boomerang type vehicles, and I got a small smattering sample of that of ones that have landed or crashed on the surface of the Earth.
Notice he didn't just say crashed, he said landed or crashed on the surface of the Earth, which is part of what has been reported by others, including Dr. Eric Davis, that these vehicles are not just crashing, they are appearing to intentionally land, which is a deep and profound mystery beyond the scope of this video. And of course, if David Grush has seen these images from recoveries, whether from satellite or otherwise, then obviously there's much better evidence out there of non-human intelligences engaging our world, just as earlier the host that was interviewing UFO whistleblower Matthew Brown conveyed he thinks is the case. Now back to satellite imagery, which I think is so unbelievably important, because I get the impression that the highest quality imagery is routinely gathered by satellites of these mysterious craft allegedly not made by the hands of man. Chris Mellon was interviewed only a couple days ago, and he relayed that he's seen these images from satellites. And this is not the first time that he's communicated that. Let's roll that clip.
Let's talk about the records that the Pentagon recently released of these unexplained encounters. There are videos and images and audio recordings, but you say that much more compelling information exists, even more than this, that hasn't been released yet. So
correct.
What have credible sources told you about such things?
Well, it's not just things that people have told me, although there's a great deal of that. So let me divide that into two things. One, I've seen some of the imagery that hasn't been released. For example, we have satellite imagery looking down on UAP from above, and some of that is of much higher caliber than the imagery that's been released to date. So that's an example of something the public would find, I think, very informative. People complain about these pictures because they're infrared imagery and they're fuzzy looking, and they're what fighter pilots are used to, but not what the public is used to. This is more like what the public is used to with clear optical photographs.
That was exceptionally revealing by Chris Mellon. He said that the satellite images would be, that the public would find them, and I quote, very informative. And he juxtaposed these images from satellites as being very different than the fuzzy images or videos that have been released so far by the administration that aviators and pilots are used to, but the public isn't. And I think what he's saying very, very clearly is that you wouldn't have to actually know the telemetry or have any of the specifics about the satellite imagery, because the quality of the imagery is so crisp that you would immediately recognize that these craft are genuinely weird and anomalous. Just to be crystal clear about what Chris Mellon really thinks about the satellite images of UAP that he has seen, there was a New York Post article that published in March that got a few quotes from him, and I'm going to read you them word for word, and I quote, "The most compelling piece of data," Mellon claimed, "are clear satellite photos of craft in space above the Earth that are obviously not man-made. We have satellite imagery of craft that sure don't look like anything that we have built or constructed," Mellon said. Now let's get back to UFO whistleblower Matthew Brown responding to the host regarding whether or not we have much better, higher quality imagery or videos of stuff happening out there.
I completely agree. On the one hand, I can understand sort of a responsible take on disclosure, starting from the the more mysterious and the less shocking and building up towards, things that are very much outside than the average person's experience and expected realm of encounters. But on the other hand, I think our government doesn't respect its people nearly enough.
The government doesn't respect its people. Well, it's going to be extraordinarily difficult to make a persuasive or convincing rebuttal to that if it is indeed true that, as David Grush has explained in the past, there is a disinformation campaign to lead Americans and the global population at large away from the biggest, most profound scientific discovery in human history. You can't frame that as respect. It's on the opposite end of the spectrum of respect. This lack of respect has manifested by placing humanity inside the matrix instead of closer to reality where we rightfully belong. And in the following clip, UFO whistleblower Matthew Brown, as I see it, made that point really well in an interview with George Knapp and Jeremy Corbell.
I have learned is that we live in a dream, a carefully constructed reality. We make use of a science that is tightly controlled and suppressed and distorted. I think we are left behind.
Humans.
I think normies, the normal humans, the people have been left behind. Us.
Mm-hmm.
People need to understand that we might have freedom of speech, but that has been subverted. We do not have freedom of inquiry. We are blocked from learning what we need to know. Just in the public world, we are blocked from advancing in science. We are taught false science intentionally to prevent us from learning more. We live in the Matrix. It's just much more boring than the movie.
Matthew Brown discusses the Matrix architects.
Everything I have seen, while certainly challenging, at least when it comes to UAP and NHI, is digestible. What is not digestible, it is the human behavior in reaction to these challenges, and how that has shaped our modern world. I think the biggest shocks will come, if disclosure comes, will come from realizing, what we have done to maintain the secrecy. And while there are certainly non-human shocks in this information and things that are unappealing, I strongly believe the much more immediate shocks are going to, again, come from being forced to look in the mirror.
Yes. Yes. I absolutely love how Matthew said we're going to have to look into the mirror, because to me, that is the number one thematic of the post-disclosure world. Our institutions, governments included, will have to look in the mirror. Individually, we'll have to look in the mirror. Our religions will have to look in the mirror. It will be, as I anticipate, a way to see where we've gone wrong and better calibrate our path forward. And with that, here's a tweet from December 9th, 2023, where I basically said exactly what Matthew said, but in a more condensed way. I wrote, "Unpopular take. The cover-up will be more disturbing to the public than the revelation of aliens." And indeed, I still maintain that position to this day. In the following clip from the Judicial Watch interview, Matthew Brown goes into, as I see it, one way we live in the Matrix, and how once we discover we've been living in the Matrix, that globally we should be outraged.
Also related to discoveries on a more practical level is just both the fundamental science that kind of explains some of the technology that we are observing, and that science being translated to scientific or technological applications itself, primarily being energy production. Energy is probably the defining resource that we've competed over since the 20th century into the 21st.
Right.
And should it be known to the public and the world that we in effect operate under some sort of artificial cartel that restrains us from accessing a more, I guess, powerful and useful form of energy production. I think there should be outrage about that.
That's very interesting.
As I see it, Matthew Brown is saying the fundamental science of UAP has been hidden from all our institutions, our universities, and every human being encompassing about 8 billion of us. We are completely in the dark that these capabilities exist. Now, you have to recognize hiding science is not exclusively the domain of hiding how something works. That's a huge mistake if you see it that way. Hiding science is equally about hiding what is possible. The moment disclosure happens and the world learns that such technologies already exist, regardless of whether it's being operated by non-human intelligence, is the moment we learn that such capabilities not only exist, but that they are possible, and that we could, at minimum, someday harness these technologies to raise the quality of life for everybody on our planet. And that has been kept from us, and that is absolutely horrifying. Now, David Grush went into this conversation in a very profound way back when he was interviewed in his first interview in 2023 by journalist Ross Coulthart. Let's dig into that now.
And while Grush says the US has gleaned some insight from these materials for military use, so much more could be done if academia and the private sector had access.
It's totally nuts that humanity as a whole, especially the U.S. citizenry as a whole, they're not even benefiting from broad research on this to solve propulsion, energy issues, novel material science that can improve people's quality of life. It's just totally nuts how it's been protected and inhibits progress.
I agree with David Grush that this being hidden and there not being broad research on these materials from the craft and their propulsion system and so forth, that as a result, we are not benefiting the American citizen or the world at large by discovering and understanding and learning better ways for propulsion, energy issues, novel material science that could improve people's quality of life. And I agree with that. But I would also convey that it's not just holding us back in those ways, as David Grush explained. It is holding us back on a steep and profound spiritual level. Because I believe disclosure would not just transform society scientifically because more scientists would have access to these recovered materials and craft, but it would broaden our horizons as to what is real and true about the nature of reality. And that would catapult and catalyze spiritual evolution in its own right, which again makes the cover-up truly horrifying.
Yeah.
There are good people.
There are very good people, and I want that message to be crystal clear. Let's not demonize holistically the U.S. government. There's a whole army of people that want change. I am one of tens, if not hundreds, of individuals within the government on these programs that would like a change.
What kind of change does David Grush want? As he's said here tonight, he wants the NHI technology to be shared so the rest of the world can benefit from it.
And I use nuclear weapons or nuclear physics as an example. It's an acknowledged program. We have nuclear weapons. You don't get to know the designs, but nuclear physics holistically is unclassified. Academia studies it. And why would you suppress basic astrophysics, astrobiology, other hard and soft sciences broadly? It's totally nuts.
What kind of change does David Grush want, as he relayed in that clip? He wants outside of the matrix. We all want outside of the matrix. David Grush talked about how nuclear physics and weapons are not classified. We know that there are nations that have their nuclear ICBMs pointed at us. We know that there are facilities that create electricity through nuclear physics. Hasn't been made classified. And if it was classified, something that central to reality, but still existing in reality, would we not consider it a way of putting us outside of reality and therefore in the matrix? So therefore, until we get disclosure, until we learn that these technologies exist, until we learn our place in the universe, we are chin deep in the matrix. And I don't know about you, but I want out. In the following clip, Matthew addresses the question of whether UAP are really actually coming from another dimension. I've resonated deeply with his answer. Let's play that clip.
But I've heard them talk about interdimensional aspects of this, that perhaps these aren't aliens in the sense that they've traveled here from another star system or something like that. Maybe they have, maybe that's one aspect of it, but perhaps there's another, it's like one does not negate the other. If there's craft or non-human intelligence that came from some other star, it certainly doesn't preclude there being some other dimension that we're not capable of seeing, receiving, understanding, that's out there doing stuff, but they come to us from some other thing that we're not capable of routinely detecting. Do you have any thoughts on interdimensionality or interdimensional activity?
Before we get into Matthew's excellent answer to that question, I just want to say that one of the central experiences that humanity has been denied is the global collective conversation on where are these intelligences coming from? Why are they here? What is their agenda? And what does it all mean? I think that would be so intellectually enriching, but even spiritually enriching. It would expand our perception of the divine and the divine's relationship with reality. And I think it would elevate us all to be given permission to have this conversation because we would know it's real. And the fact that that has been denied to us for decades is plainly wrong.
Not too many. I frankly still don't quite know what that means. There certainly seems to be a shadow biosphere, a shadow biome, things that exist here, but they're imperceivable to the unaided human senses. I don't think that means they're in a different dimension, if I understand what that term is trying to imply, which is that it's a separate universe or reality somehow overlaid or underlaid or interpenetrating ours. There's also possibly some confusion. If you have an active camouflage capability that is near one-for-one perfect matching its surrounding environment, and then that capability is disabled or turned off, something will pop into existence. And some might explain that as coming from another dimension when the reality of what occurred is much more mundane, but still fantastic.
I think that's where I land. I'm not totally sold on the whole interdimensional environment as it's usually portrayed as to where these non-human intelligences are coming from. I think their technology is so advanced that it can give the impression they're coming from another dimension, but in reality, they're just interfacing with our dimension in a way that we're not accustomed to, and maybe we've never even envisioned because we're so much further behind technologically. I love where he says that they may have camouflage capabilities that is a perfect one-to-one in matching the surrounding environment. So if there was a UAP in front of a cloud, it would just look like the cloud. If there was a UAP in front of a tree, it would just look like the tree. And that's not outlandish. Our civilization may have those capabilities not too far from now. So it's not like excessively mysterious. And it's a fascinating reflection because you could have all these different species existing and thriving in our biosphere. They're here. They live in our oceans. They traverse our skies. They monitor us. They surveil us. And yet, you could argue they're one flip of the switch away from seeing them in broad daylight, seeing them on a daily basis, knowing they're here in a way that you would never need the government to disclose, because you see them zipping around like we witness planes every day. Consider that for just a moment, how profound, mysterious, and mind-bending that is. In the following clip, the discussion centers around the very best objection, in my view, that a skeptic can have to the idea that we are not alone and that we are being engaged by non-human intelligences.
I'm going to touch on two more things, and then I'll wrap, and I'll let you have the final word. One is, I'm always curious about other countries, right? So obviously, we have some very sophisticated, both friends and enemies out there who probably have their own sets of experiences. I'm thinking of large land masses like, Russia, China, Brazil, right? They occupy big chunks of the world, and they have large seacoasts, and they're a presence. Geographically they're a presence, but they're also a presence technologically. They're very advanced, sophisticated societies. They're not, living in caves, right? So these other countries certainly must have something either similar to, parallel to, kind of like what we're experiencing, but they're all remarkably silent.
So before Matthew Brown addresses that question, I want to interject and say that this will present one of the major conversations all 8 billion of us will have after disclosure, which is not merely why did the United States lie to its people, but all the other nations who had the data that we were not alone, whether through satellite imagery, electro-optical video, crash retrievals, or whatever the case may be. Why did all the nations remain silent? Why didn't just one country stand up and say, look, we have the evidence, we're not alone, we don't agree with everybody else staying silent? That is going to be a major discussion, and one of the most fascinating, necessary, and perhaps mind-bending of all the ones that we will have in a post-disclosure world.
Yeah. Leaving the question in the air there, why? I think there's probably two main explanations to that. One is, between peer adversaries, I suspect there's a tacit agreement to not discuss these things, the motivations of which could be a combination of both not wanting to upset the status quo and invite the questions right from their populations, And two, there might be, at this point, contact between these countries and these apparent anomalous intelligences here operating on Earth. And that contact might require, for some reason or another, that leadership at least remains silent on their presence here on our planet and their activities here.
I do agree that there is a tacit agreement, and Matthew Brown said the tacit agreement may be predicated on they don't want to upset the status quo. Yes, that makes sense. Governments generally prefer the devil you know versus the devil you don't know. And number two, it would invite questions from the populations of each country, and that could not be more true. After disclosure, the questions will not cease. They will be relentless. Every investigative journalist on this planet will pursue answers with the passion of heaven. The public will probably become highly organized. Organizations will unite with organizations. The pressure will be so unfathomable on governments from the populations that for the governments it will be hell on earth, because you cannot expect, after lying to the public for 80 plus years, that once we learn we're not alone, that we're not going to want to know every last damn detail. Because as God as my witness, we will. In regarding the proposition of contact between some countries and anomalous intelligences, let's not forget what Eric Davis conveyed. He stated that George H.W. Bush told him that in 1964, 3 craft approached Holloman Air Force Base, 1 landed, and a non-human being emerged and met with Air Force and CIA personnel. Bush said he was denied further details because he lacked a need to know. So it definitely is on the table that these anomalous intelligences are in contact with some countries, and even David Grush has stated that he wants to get to the bottom of that. It seems that when he was looking into UFOs and what the government knows about it back when he was in the government, he got some credible information suggesting that there is contact.
You would think there would be a significant first mover advantage, at least on the diplomatic front, for somebody to come out and claim that trophy of saying we've met something other than humanity. Here's what we know. Yay us. We want to establish a new world order. And because we have done this service to humanity and brought us into a new level of awareness of our place in the universe, we should be the ones to set the rules for the world stage, at least for human affairs, not the established powers. But that isn't happening. Very curious.
In light of what Matthew Brown just stated, I think this relates, and I'm going to convey it to you. It's a tweet from July 27th, and I quote, "If President Trump wants the most extraordinary legacy of any world leader in the history of mankind, then he will disclose that we are not alone. Whether he deserves this legacy or not is not in question. History in general does not care about merit. It cares far more about circumstances. If you have access to Trump, send him this." I mean, it does seem kind of precarious. If another country truly believes the United States is getting closer to disclosing this bombshell reality about our universe, shouldn't the administration of the United States be really concerned that they're going to swoop in before we can finalize that legacy? I think they should be concerned about that, because as Matthew Brown stated, it would have an extraordinary, it would give an extraordinary level, at least in theory, of geopolitical influence. And what country would not desire that? With that, please do not forget to subscribe. If you'd like to support this channel, you can become a YouTube member, you can become a Patreon. A patron, you can give me a one-time donation. All those potentialities can be accessed in the description box below. Or you can slap a like on this bad boy, and I'll appreciate it so much. Thanks so much for watching. I look forward to seeing you in the next episode.